anything wrong with this timer. He said, I'm done. Anyway, I'm going to tell you two quick stories. I'm going to tell you a story going, but I'm going to tell you two quick stories. Because everything's been made right. I was at the car races on a Friday night. I go to car races every week. Every week I go to car races. It's my thing. I love car races. And I'm at the car races on Friday night, and middle of the show, I get up and I go home. 9 o'clock, beautiful night, good car count, fast track. I get up and go home. I don't know why. I'm sad as I leave the grandstand. I don't know why I'm going home. I walk into my house and Pat says, what the heck are you doing here? She startled to see me. I said, I don't know. I think I'll just sit and watch TV tonight. I was sad because my passion for racing seemingly had left me. And I turned on the TV, and it was 9 o'clock on Friday night, and 2020 was coming on. ABC, Barbara Walters and Hugh Daniels. And the first little vignette that came on, they usually did 3 little stories, and the first one that came on, called The Gift of Life. And it showed a helicopter flying over the jungles of Vietnam. And it was a story about an emergency room trauma specialist. And they were doing a book on emergency room trauma, and they asked this Dr. Swan, what was your worst trauma case that you ever attended to? And he began to recount when he was a young surgeon at the 71st Medevac Hospital in Lakeview, Vietnam on September 21st, 1968. And they brought in a soldier who was so gravely wounded that the consensus was to medicate him, set him aside, declare him expectant, and let him die. His little legs were blown off. He had shrapnel the size of your thumb in the middle of his head, and his eyes were gone. His arms were terribly mangled. I sat there and I started to shake. Sounded familiar. And Dr. Swan described this kid vividly, and the guy who was doing the story said, well, the consensus was to medicate him, set him aside, and expected to let him die. But Dr. Swan operated on him and saved him. And they said, well, how did he turn out? What'd you save him for? Did you save him for a life of being something, or did you save him for a life of terror? And Dr. Swan had no idea. And so they set about to find him. It took him 2 years. His name's Ken McGeary. He lived in Columbus, Georgia. And they started telling his story. Ken was a door gunner on a helicopter, a manned helicopter, trying to drop firefighting equipment. Infantrymen pinned down in the jungle on September 21st, 1968, when our RPG came out of the jungle and blew his helicopter out of the sky. And I sat on that sofa and I went to pieces. Pat came over and she sat down and she held on to me. She says, what's the matter? What's the matter? I said, I think this is my kid. I think this is my nightmare. I think this is my story. And it was. And they talked about, he suffers from PTSD, he sleeps with guns, he's violent, but he's married, got married since Vietnam. He has no legs, not stumps. He doesn't even have stumps, he sits on his tailbone. He has no eyes in his head. He's not partially blind, he has no eyes in his head. They had to do a craniotomy and take the top of his head. They had to put one arm back on backwards. And so he sits like this, with one arm behind him, one arm in front, like Humpty Dumpty. Because he sits on his tailbone, he doesn't have anything. And he can only feel with 2 fingers. 2 fingers. No legs, blind, he can feel with 2 fingers. And he met a woman talking on a CB radio, and they got married and had 2 kids. And he sails and he scuba dives, and he's a hell of a guy. But he suffers horribly from post-traumatic stress, and he can't get home from Vietnam, and he doesn't know what happened to him. He still does this Dookie Dow stuff, and he goes off on people, and the police are at his house a lot because he uses weapons and things. And I thought, well, maybe I can help him. I was looking right at him. So I reached out to Kenny. And they didn't believe that I was who I said, but I could prove it because I was decorated by the commander of that helicopter that day. When I told him it was Colonel John Yarborough that decorated me, then he knew that it was myself and another kid that saved him that day. That started a relationship between Kenny and I. And when I done my force deck, I told my sponsor I'd do anything except go back to Vietnam. And he said, well, when it's time, you will. Well, when I met Kenny, it was time. Kenny drug me back through Vietnam as I was trying to drag him home. And he was killing me. It was killing me. But long story short, because I'm running out of time, Kenny got sober. Listening to having the conversations we would have long distance on the phone 2 or 3 times a week. I spoke at the Georgia State Convention a few years ago. Kenny was there. And I got to this point, I said, how long have you been sober, Kenny? And out of the audience, his voice from the wheelchair, oh, about 10 years. He was an amazing guy. Amazing guy. They're going to make a story about his life. HBO's doing a movie. Nobody's going to play me. I'm not letting it. I'm sending Kenny all this stuff, and he's dragging me through the jungle, and I'm doing all this suffering on his behalf, and he asked me to send him some stuff for his movie, and I said, okay, I sent him a box of stuff. With it, I put a cover letter on this cover letter. I wrote, Kenny, I got a resentment. You never ever told me once, thank you for saving your life. It was no small feat. It's pretty damn heroic what I did. Saving his life. And every time I get off the phone, I'm waiting for my thank you. Doesn't happen. So I wrote this letter, put it with this box. I made a mistake of showing it to Pat because I don't spell well. And she said, what is this here about? She never said thank you. And I said, well, that's the truth. And I live in the truth. And she said, well, that doesn't belong there. And I said, well, it's the truth. She says, isn't there a spiritual axiom or something where if there's a bug on your ass, it's your something bothers you, your body bothers you, or something like that. I went back to edit it out. I just wanted to edit it out of this little Magnavox word processor I had in there. And I'm just trying to edit it out so I don't have to rewrite the damn letter. And I just want it to make sense so I can ship it off. And so what came out was God's gift to me. What came out was, Kenny, I've never said thank you. Wow. 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 All those years, I'd only seen me running into the burning jungle to get Kenny. That's all I saw. And it really happened. But another truth, Kenny's safe in a helicopter. I'm pinned down in the jungle. Kenny flies into harm's way for me. When that rocket hit that helicopter, he gave his sight. And he gave his legs, and he entered into that darkness and that disability for me. And nobody had ever said, Kenny, thank you. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for what you did. Selfish, self-centered, that is the root of my problem. I suffer from a bias in my perspective which is totally selfish. If I can just step back and let God in my life, He'll make everything right. He'll answer all my questions. He has. They told me if I could ever go 10 years without an infection, I'd be a candidate for a prosthetic hip. I live with chronic pain every day. 10 years sober, 10 years without infection. Go figure.
No.
I hadn't sat down or touched my left foot in 28 years. I could not sit in a chair. We did get a motorcycle cop, and in May I rode my Harley Davidson 6,200 miles. From Dallas, Fort Worth, to LA, to Washington, D.C., back to Dallas, to bring attention to the fact that we still have missing in action. I'm doing things I never dreamed I could do. I live in a world that I didn't know existed. I've got a wife that I'm nuts about. We've been together 21 years, or 23 years, and I still like her. I've never been happier, healthier, more whole emotionally, socially, legally, financially, maritally, parentally in my whole life. And all I wish for you is much of the same. Thank you.